It wasn't so long ago this year when a friend of mine was taking a taxi from her event. The taxi she had stopped was transporting 3 male passengers in addition to the male taxi driver. As their taxi drive began, one of these male passengers began to rub her inner thigh. She kindly asked him to stop, but she was met with a hostile, "Why are you going on?" by the taxi driver. Their taxi ride progressed and this man continued to rub her thigh. She asked him to stop again because she deemed it inappropriate and she verbally expressed herself as deeming it so. However, the conversation was interjected by one of the other male passengers who said to her, "My sister, if you don't want to be touched, then buy your own car, don't take public transport." She asked the taxi to stop and ended up taking another taxi to her event. I respond to the name Atty, and I'm not a feminist. I always found labels to be like cages. They're really only good for keeping people stagnant. And as a woman, I'm delighted by the illusion of my freedom, so I'm not a feminist. But let's be clear, I do not distinguish myself from the woman that feminism speaks of or the woman feminism seeks to empower. Of course, in the 21st century, everyone claims that they're so tired about hearing about the modern day women's struggle. However, it's approximately 168 years after one of the first women conferences were held in the Seneca Falls, United States, and the narrative of the black woman still reads unsettlingly the same. So the first issue I'm going to use for this talk to illustrate this narrative is the issue of rape. In the year 2015, the First Lady of Zimbabwe was allegedly addressing her nation on the issue of rape. During this address, she apparently alluded to the fact that women are partially to blame for being raped because they dress inappropriately. A bit closer to home, it wasn't so long ago either when Namibia launched its own fight against the miniskirt. This fight was launched by the Inspector General of the Police Force during a time when Namibia was plagued with a high incidence of rape. The rationale here was, if we're going to combat rape as a social problem, we need to deal with it from the root causes, which of course in this case was the inappropriate dressing of women. You see, when we tell women, or when we talk to women about rape in this manner, we say two things to them. Firstly, we say women can control whether or not they get raped. We allude to the fact that women are in fact in power in deciding whether or not sexual assaults are committed against them. We tell them if they just present themselves accordingly, they can permit bad things from happening to them. But secondly, we say women need to stop tempting men. The idea here is men find things like mini skirts, shoulders, and spaghetti straps to be sexually appealing. And in the face of these things, they unfortunately resort to rape. Of course, when it comes to telling women what they shouldn't wear, I too find myself guilty of this quite often. Sometimes I walk down the passages or the hallways on campus and I see girls wearing shorts, dresses, what have you not. And I think to myself, how does she not expect to attract attention in such short shorts? Or who lets their child come out dressed like that? Of course, after years of reflection and introspection, I realized that I too am a hypocrite because I've been conditioned by this very same system to think about women in a particular way, and I need to actively unlearn these teachings. However, I digress. Why is it problematic when we speak about rape in this manner? First things first, we deny women autonomy, and it's not autonomy in the grand sense of the word. It's basic autonomy as to how she chooses to express herself or present herself to the world on any given day. But secondly, we blame women for the actions of their rapists. Because what we actually say when we address women in this manner, we say that women make men rapists as opposed to men making women victims of rape. The third thing we do is we absolve the entire system of which these women exist in of any sort of responsibility. This means that parents and social institutions alike don't need to reflect as to what subconscious messages they could have put out there that make these men think that sometimes it's okay to gratify yourself at the expense of someone else's personal space. But the greatest risk we run is we enable the system. We tell women what they should and they shouldn't do on the basis of what their male counterparts seem to find to be easiest. So we essentially disempower the woman in order to simplify the life of the man. I'm sure you can all understand why that's harmful. That was the first illustration. Now we'll move on to the second illustration for this talk, which is going to be abortion. As you can see in the graph behind me, abortion is only fully legal without restriction in 3 African states. What I mean by without restriction means that a woman can choose to terminate her pregnancy for whatever reason she may have. In the rest of the African context, abortion is illegal unless you've got some or other special circumstances. In Namibia specifically, abortion is considered to be illegal unless otherwise stipulated under the Sterilization and Abortion Act. An example of these circumstances would be if carrying the baby to term would be so detrimental to the woman's health that it could result in death. Under those circumstances, she'd then be allowed to abort her baby. You see, when we engage women on abortion in this manner, it's for a lot of subjective reasons, but today I'm going to discuss 4. The first idea here is that it's not a cultural thing. Abortion is Western, it's European. In our context, children are considered a blessing, and they should be treated as such. But secondly, there's this notion that when women concede to having sexual intercourse, they concede to whatever repercussions the act may bear, such as, for example, falling pregnant. But thirdly, what we say is that abortion is akin to killing. And our society seems to find anything that denotes violence on the part of a woman as unsettling. But the last thing that we do is when we say that women sometimes need protection from themselves. They are not in the best interest to know what they want, let alone what they need. An example of this will be, we saw this with the wave of feminism and when it hit the African continent. Word on the street was, these Westerners and these Europeans need to stop corrupting our women. They don't really want feminism, it's just Western influence. This is problematic for 2 reasons. Firstly, we deny these women autonomy. And it's autonomy over their life and autonomy over their life choices. And I hope by now everyone realizes that our society seems to have major issues with women and autonomy over themselves. But secondly, we deny women an option that nature avails to males. When males aren't ready to become parents, they can opt out of it. It's very easy for them, in fact. They just become runaway fathers. But what we tell women is that not wanting a child and not being ready to be a parent is not reason enough to get rid of what's arguably only known to be a fetus anyway. But the sad thing about all of this is this. Even if this option was availed to women, they most probably wouldn't take it. Because just like they too have been conditioned to think about what everyone else thinks about them before they think of themselves. So they wouldn't take it on the basis of what their fathers, their uncles, and their sisters would think of their womanhood. For the purposes of this talk, we've looked at 2 specific illustrations. We've looked at the idea of rape and we've looked at the idea of abortion. The truth of the matter is this. Regardless of what issue you're talking about in relation to women, these issues keep coming up. It comes down to how we as a society treat our women and the value we place on our women. Because essentially we could be talking about something as serious as the future of sex workers on our continent. Or we could be talking about something as feeble as a woman's right to express discomfort at builders who whistle at her and call her my size. The issues keep coming up anyway. We keep trying to run from these issues by saying it's not cultural and these women actually just need to learn to love themselves within the African context. We tell these women that they need to learn to love themselves always. And mind you, what we actually really mean by always is as an extension of their cultures, as an extension of their husbands, and as extensions of their families. But further than that, it's funny because we are the same people who think that the iPhone has significantly simplified our lives. And we also can't imagine our lives without the comfort of the Mercedes-Benz. So one would think that it would be easier for us to grasp that the women we're telling not to appropriate Western and European cultures have only existed in the era of the iPhone and the Mercedes-Benz. And they don't know life, let alone culture before that. But of course, I do believe that there is some truth in telling women that they need to learn to love themselves. However, they've been conditioned to need permission from you and I in order to do so. So we need to stop prioritizing women and women's issues only when it prioritizes us. That means when it could potentially be our mothers, our grandmothers, or our sisters. We need to care about women and women issues at all times. In her book, The God of Small Things, Arundhati Roy says, "It's after all so easy to shatter a story, to break a chain of thought, to ruin a fragment of a dream being carried around so carefully like a piece of porcelain. To let it be is the much harder thing to do." So this is the story of the modern day woman. It's a real story. When you encounter these stories, do not discredit these stories and do not dismantle them either. Hear them and be more conscious in the way you engage women and speak about women issues. Unfortunately for women, your responsibility extends a bit further than that. Women need to learn to be the active voices of their mothers who lost their voices trying to speak of independence and womanhood in the same sentence. But they also need to learn to be the voices of their grandmothers, who were never taught that their worth extends far greater than them simply being the mothers to our fathers. The bottom line is this: women need to actively negotiate for their freedom, the same way they're entrusting the patriots of the system to do so in their absence. Thank you.